Those who join late, please ask them have a look at it as well. Okay, so let me know if you can't hear this video.
In this video, we're going to take a look at the human body's defense system and how it protects.
Is it audible to you all?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Does against pathogens. We can split the system between the physical and chemical barriers, which stop pathogens from getting in, and our immune system, which destroys any pathogens that do make it into our bodies. Let's start with the physical and chemical barriers. If you haven't noticed, most of our body is covered in skin, which acts as a physical barrier that the pathogens can't get through. As well as just being there, it also secretes oils and antimicrobial substances, which can kill the pathogens that rest on it. So if pathogens can't get through our skin, then they're going to have to enter through holes, like the nose or the mouth. To try and prevent this, our noses are adapted by having lots of little hairs and lots of mucus, which can trap the pathogens and any other particles as they try to flow through in the air. If they manage to get through this defense, then they're going to have to go through either the trachea or the esophagus, because those are the only two tubes leaving our throat. If they head for the lungs via the trachea, then they'll find that the trachea, bronchi and bronchioles are all covered in a layer of mucus, which again will trap any particles. To prevent this mucus from building up, they're also lined with cilia, which are tiny finger-like structures that protrude from the cells. And as these cilia rhythmically move, they slowly move the mucus and any trapped particles up to the back of the throat, where we can swallow it, down to the stomach. Now though, we've got all of this pathogen-filled mucus in our stomach, along with all of the pathogens that were hiding in our breakfast. Luckily though, our stomach produces hydrochloric acid, which is a really strong acid that brings the pH of the stomach contents down to about 2, which is so acidic that it kills pretty much all of the pathogens. Despite this formidable defense system though, some pathogens will always make it into our bodies. In these cases, our immune system takes over and hunts them down. The most important part of our immune system is the white blood cells, which continually patrol the body, circulating in our blood and tissues. And they have 3 important functions worth knowing. One of these is phagocytosis, which is the process by which certain white blood cells can directly consume, or to use the correct term, engulf pathogens. They do this by first tracking the pathogens down, binding to them, and then engulfing them, at which point they can destroy them. Another function is producing antitoxins. One of the reasons that pathogens cause us so much trouble is that they can produce toxins, which are effectively tiny poisons that can damage our cells. In response to this, our white blood cells produce antitoxins, which are small molecules that can bind and counteract these toxins, so that they can't do us any damage. The final function we're going to discuss is producing antibodies. Before we do though, I just want to clear up any confusion about the terms antibodies and antigens. Antigens are substances that our immune system detects as being foreign, such as the cell wall of a bacteria or a virus protein. Antibodies, on the other hand, are small proteins made by our own white blood cells that can lock onto these foreign antigens and then act as signals to tell our white blood cells to come and destroy them. Importantly, each of our antibodies is specific for a particular antigen. So if it can bind at this particular antigen, then it won't be able to bind any others. Once our immune system knows which of our antibodies can bind the pathogens though, it starts producing loads of them, and it remembers this for next time. So if we're attacked by that pathogen sometime in the future, then our body will start producing so many antibodies so quickly that will destroy all the pathogens before they get the chance to develop. Which is what we mean when we say that we're immune to a disease. And that is basically how we survive the millions of pathogens that attack us every single day. If you found it useful, then
Yeah, I hope that was useful. For the others that couldn't join in, there's a link here that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. I'll start sharing a bit about what we talked earlier. Are the slides visible? I hope my slides are visible. Okay, so we had gone through a bit about yesterday. We had talked about the chain of infection. Now, where the problem was, it was regarding these types of cells. So the B and T cells. So basically, what we had talked about was that it's the main immune system. It depends upon these antibodies and these killer cells. Okay, these are naturally present in our bodies, and apart from them, we had discussed that we have artificial immunity, that is through vaccination. Okay, so it works along with B and T cells, and their objective is to kill the infection. Okay, this is what we had talked about. Yeah. So we had talked about the immunity that is already present in our body, that is innate. Innate means it's there already. It's non-specific. So it's the immunity that we have within our body, and that is there for every microorganism or every pathogen. So that is our skin, our mucus, our cilia. That's okay. Yeah. Can you look at this link that I've shared just now? So I'll copy this link and I'll paste it again over here. Just have a look at this. Keep it with you and have a look at what we've seen. We were just revising what we had studied yesterday. Just mute. Okay. So yeah, and then we had talked about. Okay, so this is what we had talked about. So the B cells, the T cells, and T cells are known as killer cells. So they kill microorganisms, and I promised to you that I'll show you, and I forgot. I haven't taken out that video as yet, but I will. That's a promise. So how killer cell, there's a killer cell where it kills a cancer cell. That's my promise. I'll find it today and I'll send it to you. So, and then we had talked about, yeah, so the innate immune system is there. It's already there, and it doesn't have to be triggered. So it's your mucus, your cilia, and your skin. Okay, if it's intact, if it's there, it's okay. So we talked about with smokers how there's increased mucus. So when mucus is of the right amount, it's good for you. But when it is increased in amount, it's not good for you. So that is why they have more mucus. And there's cilia. So you have a smoker's cough, there's a lot of mucus that they throw up. So there's cilia also, the small hair-like substances that are present to protect um, ourselves from microorganisms from entering our body. They're also destroyed in smokers, so they have a lot less cilia that brushes away the mucus, excess mucus also, and they have a lot of mucus because of that, and the microorganisms can gain entry into their bodies very easily. And then we had talked about certain memory cells that are there that help our body to remember the attack that happened already. Okay, so the next time there's an attack, they will have memory, you will have memory cells in order to prepare yourself, your body, even better. Then we had talked about different types of spread. So there's of infection. So there was person to person spread. Okay. So that was through the direct route. We had talked about sexual activities, skin to skin. We had talked about human bites, which is very uncommon. Mother to child, which is known as vertical transmission, and then needle injections. And then we had talked about indirect person to person spread. This is also person to person spread, but it is not direct. So it's droplets that are there um, in the air. When a person sneezes, for instance, the droplets remain there, and they're source of infection for others. Or contaminated objects. So there's a handle of the toilet, there's a mm, dirty cloth that's lying somewhere, and that's going to be a source of infection, especially when it's in a hospital. We had talked about different vehicles. So there was a vehicle. These are the sources where how infections are spread. Okay, so we had talked about ingested water, that's a vehicle. We had talked about biological products such as blood transfusions and vaccines. So these can also transmit infections. We had talked about vector-borne. So what was a vector? An insect such as spiders, ticks, fleas. Uh, Mosquitoes, for instance, they carry malaria from one person to another. Then we had talked about animals. Animals can also spread, they can act as a vehicle to spread infections such as rabies, Pasteurella. So you'll not expect animals to spread all infections. They're just some particular infections that animals can spread. So a cat can spread a cat scratch disease. The different animals spreading different. Rat can spread rabies. Sorry, not rabies. It's plague. That was an epidemic that happened, a pandemic that happened many years ago. Okay, human infection defense mechanisms. This is where the part got tricky. Okay, the immune system. That is why I showed you this video, just to give you some more idea. So we have two types of barriers. There's a non-specific barrier system. Okay, our skin, our mucous membrane, our cilia, the hair-like projections in our body, and then the immune system. So I think the natural barrier, the non-specific barrier we had talked about, that was clear. So there was a skin which is intact. If it is not broken, it is not going to let bacteria or viruses or any other pathogens enter. Then we talked about mucous membranes that are there throughout our mouth, in our nose, that trap microorganisms in the air. Then there's stomach acid. So the acid, there's the environment in the stomach, in the vagina, in the urine, they're all very acidic. So bacteria, viruses, they can't bear acidic environment. they can live in basic environment. So there's a lot of acidity. So sometimes when this acidity gets too much out of control, so you'll know that people get a peptic ulcer. So that's because the acid is too much. It can happen because of certain drugs, it can happen because of certain illnesses. So your acid works against you then. But here your acid is working for you and giving you the proper environment where in the stomach, for instance, there's microorganisms that if they gain entry there, if they cross the other barriers and they gain entry there, they'll be destroyed. But then there are certain microorganisms that we talked about that cannot be destroyed, okay, through these defense mechanisms also. They escape even these defense mechanisms, and that is when they cause disease, and that is why sometimes we need vaccines, okay, especially in people who are vulnerable. So you'll know about the flu vaccine going on for all those who are vulnerable, for everyone actually, but specifically for those who are vulnerable because they don't have their immune systems working as well as it should be working. We talked about white blood cells, okay, so we talked about the immune system. Now the white blood cells, there are two types of white blood cells. So there are granulocytes that have granules. This is the majority of the white blood cells. Okay, in granulocytes, you have neutrophils, you have eosinophils, and you have basophils. So neutrophils will destroy bacteria, not viruses. It's there to destroy bacteria. If you have less neutrophils, if you have less white blood cell count, you're not going to destroy the bacteria. It's going to cause infection. Okay. Eosinophils kill parasitic worms. So it's worms that will be destroyed by by eosinophils, which are another type of white blood cells. And then basophils, they prevent inflammation or infection from happening. And then the second part was agranulocytes, forming the lesser part of the white blood cell count. And they were responsible for the immune system that has the B and T cells. So they're lymphocytes and monocytes. So these monocytes are immature at the moment. Okay. Initially, they're immature. They need to be matured to kill bacteria. Okay. So they'll turn into macrophages, which are mature. Okay. How this happens, we'll talk about it. We talked about platelets that are there to control our blood, the flow of our blood. I talked about surgery. I think I didn't complete my talk yesterday. So when a person undergoes a surgery, if they're taking a drug such as aspirin, if they're taking a blood thinner, so a blood thinner will actually make your blood flow easily. It's not going to let your blood clot. Okay, people when they're older age, in older age, they need blood thinners because their blood clots very easily. Okay, so if you're taking a blood thinner, like you're preventing your blood from being clotted, so your blood can flow very easily. Okay, that is very important. The blood flow is very important. Flowing blood is very important to prevent heart attacks from happening because you might develop a clog. If your blood is not flowing properly, it will clog in places, and then it can lead to heart attacks. It can lead to strokes if it's in the brain. So anywhere it can uh, lead to hemorrhage in your lungs, for instance, if it reaches the arteries or the blood vessels in the lungs. So when you have a surgery done, you will always be asked whether you take a blood thinner. Can I ask anyone why are we asked about that, or why do you have to confirm if the person is taking a blood thinner or not? Can anyone answer this question? Anyone? Does anyone have an answer for this question? No? Okay, so the reason is, I hope you're understanding the session, because unless there's a good understanding, if I'm going forward, it doesn't help So anytime you don't understand the point, please let me know. I can go through it again, just like I'm doing it again here. So the reason is because your blood, if you get a cut because of a surgery and your blood is not, you're taking a blood thinner, your blood is flowing. So when you have a surgery, your blood will continuously flow. So before the surgery, you're given some 2 or 3 days. When you stop, you're asked to stop your blood thinners from taking them, just so that your blood doesn't keep flowing when the surgery happens, in which case that can be death because of excess flow of the blood. We talked about specific immunity, uh, third line of immune defense. We had talked about how these develop, and so we had talked about two types of immunity. So there's humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity. Okay, remember humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity. So one will involve cells and one will involve antibodies. So we had talked about how artificial immunity is developed. So we have certain vaccines. Okay. So the vaccines are different type. There are different types of vaccines. Now, vaccines are for those people who cannot develop these natural immunity within themselves, such as people with cancer. They don't have a proper immune system working, so they need artificial immunity. They need vaccinations to save themselves from common infections. Uh, you have live attenuated vaccines. What are live attenuated vaccines? They are measles, mumps, rubella, for instance. You have more also. What they do is that the live vaccines are injected into your body, but they're not going to be harmful. They're changed, but they're alive. Okay, they're alive. And then there are inactivated vaccines, okay, where they're completely inactivated, such as polio and influenza. Now we talked about the humoral immunity, which is known as antibody mediated immunity. You will have the B cells. Okay, once an antigen or a pathogen, we've talked about what a pathogen is. When they're in your blood or in your lymph, the lymph is another part of your body that is similar to blood. It carries infections. So your lymph nodes will be enlarged. So you have several lymph nodes in your body, which will be enlarged depending upon what type of infection it is. So what happens? The B cell within this humoral immunity, B cell, remember what was B cell? It is a part of your immune system. So it produces memory cells. Okay, so these are memory cells. They're kept separate. This is known as natural or acquired immunity. Okay, so this is natural immunity, acquired immunity. That is what you acquire in response to in a pathogen. Cell-mediated immunity is different. It does not involve antibodies. It does not involve uh, cells of the humoral system. It happens that it involves the T cells that recognize them an infection and such, or they recognize an artificial for instance, there's an organ that you are transplanting. You're transplanting the liver. They'll recognize it and they'll act against it. Or it's a tumor or a virus. Okay. These T cells produce helper T cells. These are another type of T cells, which will stimulate the B cells to produce antibodies. And these are then remembered as memory cells. Okay, so this cell-mediated immunity will be there when you have cancers, viruses, or you have a transplant. So I'm not going into detail. So we had talked about macrophages. I told you macrophages, they're also white blood cells. The monocytes, the monocytes that I had discussed earlier, they become mature and they form macrophages. Again, why do they become mature? Because when there is a pathogen or a disease-causing organism or a foreign material, these monocytes will be activated and they'll turn into macrophages. You have T lymphocytes, and there's a part in your body called the thymus. This is very close to your throat. Okay, these are produced by the thymus. And what these T lymphocytes, I talked to you about cell-mediated immunity. You have helper cells, you have cytotoxic T cells, you have memory T cells, and you have suppressor T cells. Okay, so these are 4 types of T lymphocytes or T cells that are produced. B lymphocytes, these originate from the bone marrow. Within your bones, you have marrow. Okay, so B lymphocytes are produced within the marrow. So when there's an antigen, they will divide and produce more cells, more B lymphocytes. Then you have in the plasma cells, there'll be antibodies and memory cells. Okay, so there's a list of events that occurs, a cascade of events. So once there's an antigen that enters the body, there are macrophages, there are T lymphocytes, there are B lymphocytes, and these antibodies, all of these will be triggered to be reactivated. So how do you follow this whole process? So there's a virus that enters the body, multiplies, and then it is carried around in your blood and the lymph. As a response to this, you have the B cells, okay, and the macrophages that are there to destroy the virus, and then these are presented by the macrophages. They present the virus to the T cells. In this case, the T cells are activated. The T cells will then divide and produce clones, which I talked about earlier. So there's helper T cell, memory T cells, cytotoxic or suppressor T cells. Okay, so these will be produced. We had talked about the whole process. So antigen, pathogen enters, helper T cells are there that produce some of memory T cells. There's other effector cells or interleukin secretion that produces, that further stimulates neutrophils and macrophages. You have cell-mediated immunity, which has the T cells, and you have humoral immunity, which has the antibodies. This is the sign for antibodies, okay? So this is how it happens. So we had talked about the T cell again. The killer cells, what do? They kill the antigen at the site of infection. Helper T cells promote phagocytosis. What is phagocytosis? Engulfing or killing of the bacteria or the virus by macrophages. Okay, so they do it along with macrophages, the T cells, the helper T cells. Memory cells, again, remember, they with the help of the B cells, they remember the infectious agent. Suppressor T cells end the immune response if the infection is destroyed or if the body overreacts to the infection. So they suppress the immune system. They are there for that reason. So the T cells, they will recruit or stimulate B cells to produce a clump of B cells. This is in the form of plasma and memory cells. So B cells would produce antibodies to interact with the antigen from the virus. Okay, antigen is the killing agent. Okay, so we had talked about the non-specific immune response. So we had talked about the hair, which is there to produce, to stop the infection from entering the body. And then we had talked about certain enzymes, we had talked about the eyes, the tears, they also have a certain enzyme, which is a chemical that prevents your body from being invaded by the infection. Your nose, it traps bacteria or virus or pathogens and doesn't let it go to the lungs. You sneeze, it goes out, mucus is removed. Okay, your stomach, it has acid to break down food, but the acid also destroys infection. Okay, and it acts as a chemical barrier against the infection. Within your lungs, you have cilia, again, this hair-like projections. Okay, so they are there also to kill the bacteria or to remove them. Okay, so the trachea will start from the nose towards the lung. It runs from the nose to the lungs, and you have cilia or these hair-like projections. Okay, so some of the bacteria, they are swallowed into your stomach, there are other goblet cells also, which are within the stomach, which capture these pathogens or these organisms. And there's a mucus within your body also, within your airways, that is there as a physical barrier. So you have goblet cells, you have within your lungs also you have goblet cells. There some of the bacteria that enters your body will then be transferred either through swallowing to the stomach and then be destroyed, or they will be trapped within the lungs and then get destroyed. So that is what we had talked about second session that we had. Now coming towards the third session, sorry, the fourth learning outcome. We had talked about, just now talked about the fourth learning outcome. Sorry, the third one. Now I'll just open up the fourth learning outcome. So I hope this is clear to all of you. If not, then let me know. I'll share some more videos. If you have a look at the presentations when they're uploaded, you'll have a better idea then, because you'll be revising them. Just bear with me, I'll take a minute. Okay. I hope my screen is visible to you all. Okay, now this is to understand the specific immune defense mechanisms, okay, within the body. Just a minute. Okay, so we're talking about the immune defense mechanisms that are there to prevent our body from being infected. Okay, so what they are, how do they work? We'll talk all about them now. Just bear with me. So the first part of our discussion will be the lymphocyte development. Okay, so I will break down this session also. I will not go through the whole session because obviously we've spent a lot of time on the previous session, which I thought was important to give more of an overview of what we had talked earlier. So we'll continue next weekend, if that's okay. So the immune mechanism, there's lymphocyte development, and there's natural and artificial immunity that we had talked about earlier. So there's this video that I can share with you. You can have a look at it when you're free. Just a minute. Opened. Sorry. Okay. So I guess this isn't being accessed. I'll just try in just a minute.
Isn't going there. Anyways, I'll share it with you later on. Yeah. So we've actually
Technologies that we will discuss today in this PowerPoint presentation will be about the immune system. Okay. So, oops. Okay. So we have different types of immune system. We talked about them earlier. Just a minute. Okay. So we talked about what is the immune system comprise, what does it comprise of? So this is a figure that shows you the different parts of the immune system. So we talked about immunity and types of immunity. So there was active and passive immunity. Just bear with me. Okay. So the passive immunity, obviously, it's there that is transferred through specific antibodies, while active immunity is already there. Okay, so you don't have to produce that. It's already active and it's already there within your system. So components of our immune system, we had talked about the white blood cells, the antibodies. There are others also, which are the complement system, the lymphatic system, the spleen. Okay, it's a part of your body, the bone marrow, and the thymus. The thymus, we had talked about the T cells that it produces. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about all of these as much as we can. So, the types of cells that we had talked about, they were, excuse me, the leukocytes, the white blood cells that we had talked about. Remember, leuko, I had said leuko is white. So, white blood cells, which we had B cells, we had T cells, we had neutrophils, um, we have cytokines, kines, and we have macrophages, we have plasma cells. Okay, these are white blood cells. Then we have humoral immunity, okay, which is the antibodies that are produced, and we have cell-mediated immunity. Okay, so T cells are there. Okay, so we'll talk a bit about all of these. So how do we distinguish between active and passive forms of immunity? So the immunity, it involves physiological mechanisms. These enable our body, whenever there's any foreign material that enters our body, that they are there to destroy that foreign substance. Okay, so whether it is harmful, so let's say pathogens. Okay, so there's a bacteria, it tries and enters our skin, it tries and enters our body, but there's skin, there's mucus layers, and there's saliva, which is our spit, that is there to destroy it. So that's innate, that's already we are born with it. Okay, the second line of defense, so if they invade further on, there's another line of defense. This is through phagocytes. Okay, so they are there to engulf the bacteria or the viruses or any other organism that enters the body. This is also produced by the, okay, so there are two types of immunity that exist. There's active immunity. Okay, this occurs when your own immune system is responsible for protecting you. Passive immunity occurs from a we are protected from a pathogen by immunity gained from someone else. Now, how does that happen? So active and passive immunity, there are two types of acquired immunity. Remember, they're acquired. Okay, so and there's a difference between them. So active is produced due to the production of antibodies within our own cells. So once an antigen comes, a foreign object comes in our body, antibodies are produced. This is called active immunity. Passive is developed when their antibodies, they're produced outside and introduced into your body. Okay, so this is something that is this is not natural. Okay, so active immunity, it's usually long lasting. There's a difference. Okay, long lasting, and sometimes it is lifelong, and it is produced by antibodies within your body, and this is because of direct contact with the antigen itself. There's an immunological memory. I told you memory cells are produced. This is all because of active immunity. When the antigen enters the body, these antigens and other specialized lymphocytes are produced. There are no side effects of active immunity. Immunity does not occur immediately. That's the problem. So immunity takes time to develop. So sometimes you might have the infection, and the other time you might not have it because you've got memory cells to protect yourself against those infections. Now, what is passive immunity? As I said, it's introduced from somewhere else. So passive immunity will last only a few weeks or months. It's not lifelong as in the case of active immunity. And it is also introduced, there's introduction of antibodies from outside your body. So here in active immunity, your body is producing antibodies by itself, but in passive immunity, you're getting it from somewhere else. There is no memory cells formed there. So passive immunity, one time, that's it, gets out of the way. The second time you are infected, that doesn't help. That passive immunity will not help. Antibodies are introduced from an external source. For instance, I told you about the spread of infection. So where infection can spread from the mother to the child, that is vertical transmission, but then a mother also passes on her antibodies. This is through the placenta and through mother's milk. Okay, so these antibodies are passive and they last for a certain time. So it's mostly 6 months that a mother's immunity lasts for in the child. And then you need to get the child vaccinated for all the other bugs that can affect that child. It may cause reactions. So sometimes you can have a reaction. This is not about this, but there's other forms of passive immunity also that may then develop reactions. Immunity, however, develops immediately. So the immunity that is developed, it doesn't take time as in active immunity. It develops immediately. Okay. Then I hope that these points are clear, whatever I'm talking about. So active immunity, it is
Sorry.
attained. Yeah.
Can you go slowly a bit, please? You're so
Okay.
quick.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. That is why I'm constantly asking. So yeah, so active immunity, it's produced as soon as you're infected. There are antibodies that are produced, and these then save your body from further infection. And they have memory cells also. There are no side effects of this immunity. However, passive immunity, it has to be acquired from somewhere else. Okay, so your body cannot produce this immunity on its own. It needs some other source to give you that immunity. And as I said, it develops immediately, but it is not lifelong. So an example was given in the case of a mother. Sometimes you are traveling to some other country. For instance, you're traveling to a tropical area, and you are being vaccinated for a certain infection that is spread over there or that is prevalent over there. So in that case, what do you do? You need to get vaccinated and you get antibodies against um, 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 that infectious agent that is in that area, in that tropical area where you're going to. So what happens, that passive immunity lasts for very less time. It's not going to be lifelong. So if you're planning to live there for long, that's not going to work. Okay, it may have some reactions. As I said, mother's antibodies would not have any reaction, but if you're having a passive vaccine that has antibodies within itself, that can have certain reactions. Okay, but however, as soon as you're traveling, you just get immunized and you're there. You're ready to um, be protected against those infections. Um, so that's the beauty of passive immunity. But there are some side effects also. So active immunity, you get it when you're exposed to a pathogen, such as a virus. This will lead to antibodies within the body. They're produced. The antigens, these antigens, the infectious agent, it is present. So the antigen is actually present on the surface of the virus. So for instance, there's a virus or a bacteria or any other pathogen. They have certain markers on their body. They're known as antigens. So what happens? These antigens are, when they're introduced in our body, they're recognized by our body's antibodies. Okay, so antigens on that organism, present on that organism, they're recognized by the antibodies. Okay, so the antibodies then bind to these antigens to destroy them. Passive immunity is acquired when antibodies, so these antibodies that are there already in our body, we don't have them. For instance, there's a yellow fever going on somewhere, and we're going to a tropical region where there is yellow fever that is prevalent. It's mostly in the forest areas, and we need antibodies against them. So our body doesn't have them. So if we go to that area, we will be infected by yellow fever. We can be infected. That's a very high chance. However, if we are passively immunized, where we get antibodies that are introduced through vaccines, okay, so we can be protected against those viruses or those bacteria or those pathogens, which our body doesn't have already. So our body has certain antibodies. They're there already. That's active immunity. However, the antibodies that cannot be produced in our body, they can be introduced through passive immunity. Okay, is that clear to everyone? I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go very, very, very slow. I don't mind going slow, but I would mind if I'm going faster. Thank you for letting me know. And I would mind, obviously, if you've not got it. So I don't mind going slow and not completing the session today. We can do it at a later time, just like we did the first session. So now the major components, I think I'll end over here, and then we can start from later on. So the major components of the immune system, what are their roles? We talked about the humoral and the cell-mediated immunity. Remember, humoral immunity produces antibodies. Cell-mediated immunity has T cells. Okay? Humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity, they're within the body, the human body, and they're there to defend against harmful agents like pathogens, like we talked about, bacteria, viruses, and toxins. Sometimes there are important differences between them. Okay, so sometimes they're similar to each other, but sometimes they also differ. So you can acquire humoral immunity to any pathogen or a disease when there are antibodies that are introduced in your body. So let's say I have an infection. I've had an infection. Okay, so they science has a mechanism where uh, you can be exposed to some infection, um, and then my antibodies can be introduced into your body. This is through vaccines. Okay, so it's a bit tricky. So you can acquire humoral immunity against some infection when there are antibodies that are introduced. As I said, humoral immunity it's antibodies. Okay, so there's a person who has been previously exposed to the same infection, circumventing the humoral immunity. So you have me, for instance, I developed an infection and my body produced some antibodies. Okay, so the antibodies within my body, they can be introduced into your body. Okay, so that is how, if you don't have the antibodies you can get prevention from that infection through my antibodies. But having said that, antibody-mediated immunity will involve a set of molecular components and processes that will be different from cell-mediated immunity, which we had talked about, T cells. A bit more about this. Just let me have a look here. I think I will end over here till slide 10. Just give me a minute. So we have it till 24. Slide number 10 will be fine. Okay, so we had talked about humoral immunity and cell-mediated immunity. Now, the last slide that I have here is that humoral immunity, it's going to produce antibodies. And the main drivers of the humoral immunity is B cells. Whereas cell-mediated immunity, it does not depend on antibodies. Okay, and the main driver for the cell-mediated immunity is T cells, macrophages, and cytokines. Okay, so you have humoral immunity in which you have the B cells that produce antibodies. In cell-mediated immunity, you have the T cells, you have macrophages, and cytokines. Okay, I think that's it from my side. I will go into more depth next weekend on Saturday. Please have a very good look at whatever has been taught to you right now. I'm stopping the recording over here. Stopping share. So just have a good look at whatever has been taught to you. And I shall see you then next weekend. And we will have a discussion. So I will not proceed unless I know that you've understood whatever I have taught you. So please go through this YouTube video, have a good look at it. And yeah, I'll see you next weekend and we will have a discussion. And then once I know that you're confident in it, it is only then that I will proceed. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope you have a nice week. I know it's been a heavy topic, but this is why I'm breaking it down. So this is why you need to go and have a look at the videos that will be shared on Monday with you on your Moodle page. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
very
You
much.
take care of yourselves. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.